So, welcome to Marketing Pittsburgh's second power panel, Design That Sells. We're going to be talking to Marketing Pittsburgh's industry experts, designers, and strategists on everything from how to develop a clear and consistent brand to emerging industry trends. My name is Jack Poole. I'm the moderator today. I'm the creative director of Orange Astronaut and a co-founder of Marketing Pittsburgh. Marketing Pittsburgh is a member-based professional association. We provide everything from networking opportunities, professional development, and events. And speaking of events, our flagship marketing conference, Generator, is coming up next month. And this year, we're going virtual. Over the course of 3 days, we're going to be rolling out exclusive content from speakers and creators and panelists from across the Pittsburgh region. If you'd like to learn more about that, visit us at marketingpittsburgh.com and be sure to subscribe to our mailing list, as we'll be talking more about that over the next week. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending. The chat in this Zoom meeting is open, so if you have questions, please submit them in the chat and we'll answer them towards the end. I'd like to ask that everybody stay on mute. We're just going to be talking to our panelists today, but again, if you have questions, be sure to leave them in the chat and we'll get around to them at the end. So without further ado, this is Design That Sells. I'd like to start by having our panelists introduce themselves. We'll go around and we'll start with Donald Bunney.
Hi, everybody. My name is Donald Bunney. I'm the owner and design director at Egghead Creative. We're a fully remote creative agency based in the surrounding areas of Pittsburgh.
Thanks,
Hi,
Donald.
guys.
Welcome. Go ahead, Leah.
I'm Leah Wiegmann. I am the creative director at Niche, a local Pittsburgh startup, and also co-owner and creative director for Spruce Pup, which is another Pittsburgh startup that my husband and I started. So kind of day job, after hours job.
Thank you, Leah. Welcome. All right, and Shah.
Hey everybody, I'm Shah. I'm a design strategist. I do UX and also strategy work and also just a bit of creative, a little bit of everything. So this goes to show you everything you can fit in a title, doesn't fit in a title. Let's see, I'm at UPMC Enterprises. I've been here for over 3 years now. And before that, worked with some agencies in New York, Singapore, and did a little bit of time in startups as well.
Thanks, Allie. All right, those are our panelists, everybody. We're super excited to be talking to them today and super excited to be talking to all of you. So thanks again for attending. Let's get started. So I'd like to begin by talking very broadly about what we're here to talk about today, and that's design in marketing. So I'm going to go to Donald for this first question. What does design within the context of marketing mean to you?
So I basically have 3 goals in mind when I'm designing for marketing. The first one is to build the brand, bring awareness to the brand. The second one is to generate leads. And the last one is to educate the public on whatever the business or service is that we happen to be working with. Because I believe that our main goal as a creative agency is to kind of be the bridge between the client and the customer. So our job is to help the business or the brand do whatever we can to find that target market and then to get that target market back to that brand.
Awesome. Thank you, Donald. Leah?
Yeah, I think about this question a little bit more in the context of how I work, which is with a marketing department. So in terms of marketing and design, I think that they go hand in hand. They're kind of the 2 hands that make the whole structure work together. So marketing is a little bit more of the bigger strategic thinking, and design is a little bit more of the down and dirty work to actually make it do all of the things that Donald just very clearly stated of kind of getting out there in front of the public.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, and Allie?
Sorry, I'm trying to master unmuting myself. Yeah, so I work in-house and I'm also like working with a marketing team and sometimes pretty far removed from it. The kind of work that I do right now is sometimes focused on like such a specialized person that the marketing aspects of sometimes takes a backseat in terms of thinking exactly what we produce for marketing, but we become hyper focused on trying to understand what the needs for people that we're trying to meet. How do we make something that's so incredibly useful to them and fills a unique space in the broader market that it's a very desirable thing to have. In terms of doing like design strategy kind of work, we tie up with the market in terms of thinking about how does the thing that we're making hold a unique place in the market enough to like really fill some gap that's there. I guess in terms of like design as a practice, I really like take off the idea of like marketing for design and just look at the core of design and thinking about how do we make something that's like really easy to use, really wonderful to use, really providing value. And that's the thing that makes it sticky. And then marketing on top of that becomes a whole lot easier if you just kind of like target and nail something that's like really wanted.
Yeah, it's a good point. And that's actually a pretty good segue here into our next topic, which is all about strategy. So it seems like all four of us have experience in both agency scenarios and in-house scenarios. But in a lot of ways, it seems like the strategy whenever approaching a new client or a new project is the same. You know, we're sort of here identifying the goals of design in marketing, like converting, identifying what the need in the market is and using design in order to satisfy that. So I'm going to start this question off to Leah. How do you personally approach strategy when, say, onboarding a new client or beginning a new project?
Yeah, for starting a new project, the strategy for me is really getting a bigger understanding about the client that I'm working with. So I tend to have like a big, broad questionnaire to learn a lot about who they are, what their product is, and kind of their end goal user. I think it's really important to know who you're targeting for and to build kind of a brand around that or a strategy around who you're actually trying to target for.
And what mistakes can be avoided by focusing on strategy first, Leah?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot goes into the strategy up front. I spend a lot more time there, I think, than on some of the other parts, because it is so important to make sure that you have clear guidelines. In terms of working with clients, it's really good to set clear boundaries and give them a clear understanding of the process. Transparency is really important. And it also kind of gives you key markers to make sure that you're working towards an end goal and not going all over the place.
Great, thank you. Let's go back to Allie. So how do you personally approach strategy when onboarding a client or starting a new project?
Yeah, so if I'm working with someone I've never worked with before, usually I've come to them or they've come to me with a specific project in mind. So I try to get them to kind of talk about where they are, what they're after in the first place. And I find for, I'm thinking outside of the context of like working in a big company now and some of the past work I've done with smaller companies. If you're a smaller company, you don't always like have good answers to good strategy questions. You might just really be putting it together, and design might be and marketing might be completely new to you, or like a little bit about it. So I get people to kind of talk about maybe the first few things they're trying to do. And from that, I start to hear about their understanding and literacy of some of the different types of work that they might need to get into to have a strategy as a whole. Usually people have some kind of little bit of something in terms of strategy or a brand. And I see what that thing is, and then I try to like build up from what they know to take them towards whatever the big picture of their strategy might be. So if they've maybe they're aware of like one person in their target audience that they like a lot, and maybe they know about one competitor, and so maybe I would like try to see who they know about right now and look at some of their competitors and try to take what they know about that one competitor one step bigger with saying, well, here's some other audiences that they're reaching. Maybe you're reaching those too. And I like that kind of like looking at what they know and building up from it a little bit, and maybe seeing some areas of their strategy that are, sometimes they're like really well rounded out. You can kind of leave it in place. So I guess what I'm saying is like, I'll try I'll try to like listen a little bit and ask some targeted questions and see where to fill in the gaps a little bit. And from there, just try to see how we can like get the thing done that they want done. And maybe, I'll look at where we need to maybe beef something up a little bit around like their brand or their messaging or their awareness of either the market they're working in or, what their goals are that they're trying to accomplish with any project and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, you really got to put a lot of focus on that listening, as you said, in that first stage, and like Leah was saying, she has people fill out a questionnaire. So there's a lot of like information gathering in the beginning, and we're not just designers in these contexts, but we're strategists as well. We have to listen and figure out where they're at, where they exist within the competitive space, and then how we can build upon that. All right, yeah, awesome. Okay, let's go to Donald for the same question. How do you approach strategy when onboarding a new client?
Yeah, so the girls hit on some really amazing and important things with the learning your client, learning what they know, where the gaps may need to be filled. One thing that I like to do is I used to use a questionnaire, and it would always end up leading to a phone call anyway. So I just kind of skipped the questionnaire part. And now when meeting a new client or a potential client, we have an introductory meeting where I'll take some of those questions that were on my questionnaire and get their answers. But it's very important for me to hear how they describe their brand or their vision straight from their mouths. That way, it can't be misinterpreted. If you're reading a mission statement or something like that, you may have an idea of what they're trying to say, but maybe they're trying to actually say something different. So for me, one of the most important things to have is the verbiage comes straight from their mouths to me so that I can kind of build from there.
Right, and then maybe you can hear some nuances there as to maybe confidence in what they think and feel about what their brand is, and then maybe you can more specifically figure out how to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, there's that first call is sometimes a feeling out process, not just for us but also for the clients, because ultimately if we're going to put something successful together, we have to be able to work together. And just by listening to the tone in their voice and things like that, you can pick up on like little nuances that, maybe they're a little shaky here. They're not ready to go all the way like they think they are. They're a little hesitant. So listening to them and actually hearing their voice right up front, that's probably the most important part for us to bring on a new client.
A lot of this initial strategy that we're talking about is probably most important when you're developing a brand. So that's going to lead me into my next topic about branding in general. So a lot of our participants today actually aren't designers. They're other marketing professionals or business owners. So it might be good for us to talk about why is a clear, consistent, research-based branding process important for every company or product. And I'd like to throw this back to Donald to start.
Sure. So one of the most important things when you're introducing a brand or a product into the market is consistency, because it builds trust. And, what you're trying to do is you're trying to put out a language or an emotion attached to that brand and that idea, because whether it's from the top of the company down, the people using the verbiage, or the potential clients or the current clients, if everybody's speaking the same language, then you can all make sure that you're on the same page. And then that's where, those mistakes, those missing the target audience and not getting exactly what the client had in mind, that's kind of where that inconsistency can come in. So I was thinking about this earlier today, and I thought, every time I go into an Apple store, everything's white. And that's just, every Apple store is like that. So if you walked into an Apple store tomorrow and everything the same, except everything was green, you would kind of be thinking, well, did Apple do something different? Did this store do something different? Is it not actually affiliated with Apple? Things like that. And just when those kind of doubts or questions start to come into a consumer's mind, that's when they start to look elsewhere to solve whatever problem that they're trying to get solved. And they are, they may go somewhere else and buy that product instead of yours.
Very cool. All right, Leah, why is clear, consistent, research-based branding important for every company, product, and identity?
Yeah, I think to piggyback on to what Donald was saying, there's a lot about consistency. So branding, we can talk all day about how, you can create a brand and it can create different vibes for different companies. The consistency is the harder part. It's kind of making sure that every bit and piece of that brand, of that company, is using that same language, that same visual identity, that same consistent look, feel. It's the essence of the brand. And the bigger the company, the harder that is to do. It's something that you kind of need to establish early, or it gets much harder to do going forward. But to our previous question about kind of how do you figure out what that company is, it's a lot about asking those questions to the client themselves, figuring out like, how would they describe the brand, and do all the bits and pieces actually ladder up to what they're saying? If you put the verbiage and the visuals together and you ask someone else, would they say the same thing? So you need to kind of have those guidelines so that once it does go out into the world and, it trickles down to the sales team is using the collateral, the marketing team, the customer service team, like everyone that it's touching, or to the Apple analogy before, like an Apple store in California should look the same as an Apple store in New York. You shouldn't feel like you're going to two different companies' stores just because the location is different. So I think I'm a big proponent of guidelines and making sure that there's consistency across the board. I think that all big companies kind of have really great, strong brand guides, and they're hard to do, but they're worth the effort.
Yeah, and something I'm hearing you talk about specifically with consistency is adoption. The brand has to be well adopted by not only everybody within the company, but adopted and accepted by the consumers. You could develop what you believe is the best brand, for this company, and it fits, just perfectly within their space and, within their competitors. But if everybody at the company, or everybody that's the voice of the brand, isn't going to comfortably adopt it, then it's not going to work. So you have to take that into consideration when branding.
Yeah, you absolutely need to make sure everyone feels involved, because that creates that brand evangelism, which then carries out to the rest of the brand.
Absolutely. Allie, what would you like to add?
Well, I like what people are saying. I think Leah and Donald covered consistency really well, so I'll say other stuff, which is that, I'll just build off what Leah said last. Is just like, when it comes to branding, like having a lot of people involved, I find can be very important, because a lot of people are responsible for the end experience of the brand, be it through like something visual that shows up on social media or the company's website, or a service experience that somebody might have else, like in a physical store, or even, just like calling the company if you need some kind of support. Like, you want people to have an experience that say, that is very fill in the blank. And then I saw part of your question was like, how do you kind of ensure this? So like, just getting a lot of people involved up front when you're working with a company to do something like a brand definition workshop, where you're going through and you're talking about what the brand is and what the brand isn't. What is it the opposite of? If it, getting people to look at brands that they relate to and think of as a mark of, or a standard of excellence that they would like to grow towards, is really good. I think even like in the previous question, talking about strategy and brand, one of the things I like to try to do is show people really great examples up front to like up their idea of who they could be and how dynamically they could be that thing. Like, get them to think through the list of all the things that are the elements of their company or their experience of whatever they're doing, and how would they layer whatever their brand is onto that. It can really like stretch things out a little bit. Yeah, and just I love to do like just brand definition exercises where you're asking people those different questions, like how do you describe yourself in this or that context. Something like a mood board where you're like getting a bunch of different like visuals or maybe words or different kinds of copy or things that are exemplar of that company. And sometimes I've gotten them to do a mood board and they're like, here, I did a mood board for your competitor, but here's the thing. You can't be the all white store because Apple's the all white store. You've got to be something with a twist, you know, and that's going to be the thing when people think of your store, when you want them to rattle off, what are these top 3 things, or any, you know, any part of a product or service, what are the top 3 things you want people to take away? And that's kind of nice and grounding, I find.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to go back to Leah for a little bit too. Could you talk about the branding process for Spruce, since this was a company and a product that you co-founded, so you were sort of there from the ground. What was the branding process for developing a product like that?
Yeah, well, for Spruce, that was probably the easiest branding project because it was my husband and my baby. We had both been working at the startup For Moms for 7, 8, 9 years, something around there, consecutive, you know, we each had different timelines there. But after kind of working at a startup, that it wasn't our baby, but it felt very close. We'd always kind of dreamed about what would we do if we started our own project or our own company. And we've always been dog people and we've always treated them like our family. So we started ideating just on what would we do if it was a dog company. And we love camping and the outdoors and taking our dogs with us. So kind of from all of the things that we loved, we just came up with our brand. It really honestly is the easiest branding because it's just what we wanted. And we didn't have to deal with clients and get feedback, really. It was kind of, as long as we both liked it, we were good, and we're still working on it. But I think we're pretty happy with where we are at the moment. Obviously, we'd love to be a bigger name, but it's hard when you're doing it, you know, an hour here and an hour there.
Right. Yeah, it is a lot easier when you're developing a brand for something that for a product or a company that you're also developing at the same time. You know, otherwise, when you're coming into into a new client or a company, you can use tools like Ali was mentioning, like a mood board, to sort of figure out where they're at as a company. You know, what they believe their brand already is before you can start to offer your insights. And again, that's going to help with you know, brand evangelism when you're done with the process. So I'd like to move on and start with Ali here for this next topic, and it's user-centric design. And Ali, I know this is one of your specialties is UX design. So I'd like to ask, what is your philosophy for keeping the end user of your design in mind?
Oh gosh, where to begin? So like I have little catchphrases that I think of all the time when I'm doing stuff. And I think this applies more or less to the area that you're working in, but we, like in healthcare, we have to say to ourselves a lot, you are not your user. We say this to all our stakeholders, like you're not the user. Like we might be part of who the user is, we might be some types of the user, but we're not all the users. And for that reason, we have to continually like listen and remain curious and do a sort of like call and response on what we make and to see how it lands. And we also think about when we're, you know, we build some really complex applications in healthcare, and there's a lot of different ways that you could make things really efficient and really about the numbers and performance, and you could, you know, cram a lot of data in, but we try to keep thinking again, like, how can we make this something that people can live with and want to use every single day? And they're going to stare at this for, you know, sometimes like 8 hours or more a day. How can we make this like something livable, I guess, is a way to frame it. So that kind of stays at the core of stuff. And then, yeah, I'm thinking, why is it something? Is that enough? That's really at the heart of it. Everything else kind of builds out from there, just remembering that someone has to live with this all the time. Yeah, and that you just don't, you have to kind of listen. I think maybe it's important to like know the sources of information about your users. Like, where are you going to get information about your users from? Like, figure it out early. You know, I'm really lucky, and then I get to partner with the people sometimes who are going to use our application. So I get to hear a lot of that early on. But beyond that, you know, thinking about beyond the launch of a product or the launch of a service or anything like that, how are you going to keep hearing from people, I think is a big deal, because people change. And if you are doing marketing on a lot of different platforms, beyond them seeing your product once on something like Instagram, you know, and liking the way it looked there, you might have to figure out other things that are going on in their life and other places they spend time in the internet and in the world. So you can like reach back out to them or say things that are relevant to them. Maybe it's about something that's happening in the world today. Maybe it's about something that's like shifted in the news, and you just have to track your industry really well and come back and say, hey, the laws around this thing changed. Now, did you know you can do fill in the blank? Or new information has become available here so that we can reach you directly as a patient or reach you directly as a physician and offer you this new thing. Did you know that? Like, just, yeah, I think you really have to like just be dynamic about the places that you're going to find to interact with them, and really like set some time aside to keep knowing who they are. And I can't say that enough to like any business of any scale, which is just like, just because you learned who they were once doesn't mean that you continue to know who they are like a year from now and 2 years from now. They just keep changing, and it's a relationship you have to maintain. So
right. Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to Donald now with this question about user-centric design, and I'll reframe it a little bit to why is UX so important in designs that customers directly interact with?
I think you ultimately, while you're designing it, need to think of how it's going to be used. Is it going to be touched, or is it just something that's going to be looked at, or is it going to be even something like the information that the customer or whoever's using it may be looking at? I know, like, from a design perspective, let's say you look at, you know, any kind of product, when you're putting the product out there, if you're not making it user friendly, it doesn't matter if you can use it. As you're developing it or helping somebody develop it, you're going to become a pro at it. So you ultimately don't become the most important person to decide exactly what the user needs. So you can test with, you know, different kind of groups and whatever else. But I think that one of the things that we do in design is when putting out that information on a package or deciding how to even create whatever that package is going to be, I think it ultimately, you kind of have to work backwards a little bit. Like, this is how it's going to be used. So what can we do to kind of backtrack it and then build it?
Right, working backwards is so important. Keeping
Yes.
that end goal in mind, and you know, where that design is eventually going to sit. You know, either in reality or in the marketing funnel. Leah, do you have any thoughts to add here on user-centric design, keeping the end user in mind and user experience in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think what everyone's saying is right on track. To piggyback on like what Ali was saying, it's important to just be thinking about the end user, and it's not you. It's not always you. So working at For Moms at the time, I was not a mother. I had never had kids, but I had to kind of put myself in those shoes, listen to all of our customers. You know, we do in-home ethnographic research, just kind of listening to our users and understand that, you know, when you're a new parent or even second, third parent, you don't want to have complicated instructions to put together a baby product. You don't have the time, you don't have the patience, you know. So we spent a lot of time making sure that our products had really, really simple instructions with wayfinding on the products themselves, and, you know, like really trying to make it as simplistic as possible, to make it as easy as possible, because we know that this person is in like this very pivotal moment in their life, and they don't need any more stress. So One tiny little example, I know Allie deals with a much broader range of end users, and it was a little bit easier to kind of know parents.
Right, right. And that was, you said that influenced the product design. How about, say, like the web design or, a catalog design, however they would be viewing it in a marketing context in order to sell or educate on those products?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we actually did a lot of, so in the stores, we would end up just doing end cap displays so that people could actually just use our products instead of having to actually read through. Our products were so easily designed. We spent a lot of time on the interfaces to make them really intuitive, so that you didn't need instructions to know how to use it. But then in store, we would work with the stores to make sure that people could actually just use them instead of having to read a whole pamphlet. Like, just use it. We did a lot of videos so that, again, no reading, just watch it, see how it works. Makes it really easy.
Yeah, that's a great strategy. Really getting the product in people's hands before they even purchase.
Yep.
All right, so for this next topic, I'd like to open this up to the panel. So when you think of something, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. So this is about specifically within design, the tools and the platforms that we use. So what is the secret weapon in your design toolbox? Who's got it? All right, Leah goes first.
Mine's really simple. It's a pen and paper. I always prefer to sketch physically, whether it's a user flow or whether it's like an actual like illustration to demonstrate something. That's the way I grew up. I think all of us probably had some kind of art background that got us to where we are. I always love to draw, and so that's my go-to. It's the quickest thing. Even though I'm using Procreate now on my iPad, I still prefer pen and pencil.
That's how I start with logo design as well. I just gotta, get out in a park and sketch in a notepad or start in a whiteboard. It's just something about the pen to the paper that certainly helps. All right, Donald, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off of the pen and paper. I think the Adobe Suite is pretty much the industry standard. But one more thing to add about the pen and the paper, what I've found, I always start there too. It's the easiest and quickest way and gives you the most freedom to get your ideas down on paper. You don't have to go through the channels of figuring out what tools you're going to use within a design program or anything like that. You just have the pen and the paper and your mind. And I've found also that's the best way to, at the very least, start. Obviously, then you move on to the next phase and start developing things. But in order to use your time wisely and efficiently, the pen and paper is the go-to.
Absolutely. All right, Allie, and your secret weapon.
I'm the only one left, so I don't know if I raised my hand. For the romance of the pen and paper. I love this pen and paper. It's really, really hard to beat. And then there's a nice quietness to it in that you're usually alone when you're doing it. And so the stress is off and you're just like getting to chill out and relax and see what comes up. And yet here we are in this isolated and separated time. So I work with a lot of people who I think we're all like pen and paper. And then we like grew up and we were like, all right, I guess we have to be on the whiteboard now. So it went up to the wall. And then, we all got distributed again. And so for now, my secret weapon, beyond the pen and paper and holding it up to the camera, is a tool called Mural, which is an online whiteboarding tool. And you can connect to it with an iPad or a Wacom tablet. And they have a draw function. So you can draw just like pen and paper online and multiple people can do it at once, which is convenient. It also has like some different kind of like things like sticky notes and little shapes and stuff you can scatter across a board to collaborate on. Bonus, it's like free or low cost at an individual or like small industry level, so it's very affordable. And that Mural has been like a lifesaver right now for getting multiple people looking at something at the same time. And yeah, it's got that nice like walk-up usability as well. So if people are familiar with Photoshop or other Microsoft tools, you can get in and do it. So we get people who are not designers like playing around with it which is bonus for collaboration. Yeah.
Donald?
I just have one more thing. It's something that when you think of design, you may not think about. Music is huge for me. Like Ali said, you're alone usually when you're sketching, or even if I'm in with a few different people, just having music on in the background. But when I'm by myself, it depends. I listen to a lot of different kind of music. So depending on what we're working on, depends on the different kind of music to kind of put me in the right frame of mind to be able to just be as creative as possible.
Yeah, that's great. You're sort of when I'm asking about tools, you're not really thinking about these other things that could be, for your other senses in order to inspire you.
Yes.
I think my secret weapon that I've been using lately was more along the lines of what Ali was saying with Mural, is that it has to do with this online collaboration, because we're not in these situations anymore, at least for the time being, where you can all gather around a computer, and have the, creative suite up and sort of, point and have, everybody can have input on what you're working on. So I use Canva for stuff like that. And I wasn't a huge early adopter of Canva. I was sort of holding on to the creative suite, but what you give up in control, you gain in collaboration. And sometimes when you're dealing with fast content, things that you need to get out really quickly, and working with non-designers, sometimes you just got to go with something like Canva or Mural to whiteboard those ideas and get out that content pretty fast. All right. So let's talk now about unique challenges. So things that we're working on that are unique to us. So I'm going to start with Leah for this question. What unique design challenges are you excited to conquer on your current projects?
Well, I just started a new job. So I am 1 month into being creative director at Niche, and I am very excited to kind of dig into what they've already built and kind of what we can build together as we move forward. They're at a very pivotal moment in their startup career, where they're kind of in a rapid area of growth, and the company's going through a lot of changes, which is something I'm familiar with in my past startup life. So I'm excited to kind of be able to give them those guides that we were talking about earlier, the kind of brand standards and the brand guides, which they have a small base of, but I think we're going to be working on kind of really amping that up and really kind of building to the company that they see themselves becoming in the next year or two.
Do you feel that you're bringing a lot of expertise from your previous positions, to this company as you're learning about who they are and where they want to go?
I sure hope so. No, I definitely think that there's a lot that I can bring in. There's a lot I need to learn about the way that they work and about, how the company is already structured. So it's a fun kind of mixture of what can I do and what can they teach me too.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on Niche in the next couple months and years, and specifically in their creative department. All right, I'll throw this over to Ali now. So, Ali, what are some unique design challenges that you're currently excited about conquering?
Okay, so I think for a lot of my career, I've been brought in as the designer, where they're like, okay, there's this business and we need you to do something for part of the business to make this thing. And it wasn't a question of whether or not to make the thing, it was what to make. And I felt very comfortable in that space. And then now I'm in a position where we're looking at some collaborations with people in healthcare and different spaces in the market, where the question is, do you make something in this space because it's viable for a business that we have the capacity to create, or do you invest in another company, or do you not do anything at all? So having those three options on the table is brand new. I think, like, if you're working startups, you're maybe a little bit closer to this kind of stuff more often. But I think, working in some of the healthcare spaces are just crazy, and it's new information, and to have that scale of question and to wade through the murkiness of conversations around to build or not to build and what and how it's been new territory for me as a designer, and it's brought out a lot more facilitation skills, where you're trying to get a lot of people to talk and describe doubts and fears, or like particular skills that would let us do something in that space, and a lot of exercises in like the design thinking space, around like problem definition and opportunity, like weighing different opportunities. And if anybody's familiar with like the business design is kind of this up and coming discipline that merges some design thinking stuff with like different business opportunity assessment processes. So we've been using some of that, and it's like interesting and scary and different. Yeah.
Business design is a discipline. I'll have to read about that further.
Mm.
All right, Donald, what are some current challenges that you're currently working through?
So we just launched this year, and not the best time to launch, turns out. But my current challenges are figuring out a way to take my end of year one goals and kind of mesh them with some of my year two goals. When I first started the agency, I had originally planned out 2 years. And so it's a little more challenging now, since it's less likely that we're going to hit our goals by the end of this year with just everything that's gone on and being a new business and among the really great creative agencies in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of them. So finding our place there within that kind of realm of kind of creative agencies in the area, but also being fully remote, it allows us to easily work with anybody anywhere. And I think that's pretty much the norm at this point because of technology basically running our everyday lives. But just kind of finding our way and finding where we fit into the current landscape, and really getting somebody to take those chances on us. Because we do have a lot of talent and capability of putting out very high quality work, but the biggest challenge is getting our name out there and getting people to, like I said, take that chance on us.
Very important position to be in right now, and probably throwing a lot of creativity and design into how to differentiate amongst the other creative agencies in Pittsburgh, as you were saying. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So let's talk now with our last topic before we open up the floor to questions. I see we have several coming into the chat. Let's talk about up and coming trends. And I'll release this to the panel again. So, as soon as you think of something, just let me know. So what is an up and coming design trend that you are eager or not so eager to implement in your own work? Who's got an idea? All right, let's start with Allie.
I'm so enthusiastic about my idea. Yeah, so I liked this question because I was like, what are the trends? Do I know the trends? I'm just like experiencing the trends. Okay, so I think that I'm gonna go with a trend that I saw out in the world and experienced, which is this design in the post-truth era, and which brings up all these really intense questions around transparency. And when you are in a scenario where you're creating a business, the business can try to put itself forward as like perfect, and it can try to hold a position of power for maximized earnings or spending, or like control of whoever's got that tool at their fingertips. And I think this question of like transparency and doing things with transparency and lending credit to different types of information or media or things that might show up in your site is really interesting to try to like give some like context to yourself as you do it, and think, how do I create a platform that empowers the users in like an equitable way, especially in healthcare. Like I think power gets stuck in a lot of different places. Yeah, so like, if you're creating something that makes it easier to explore research, how do you properly credit the sources for research, all the different sources for research? If you're creating a tool that, like maybe channels resources in one place or another, how do you make sure that there's like equity in the way those resources are channeled? I think it's just like to think about working with great transparency and bring up that point again of transparency when you're working with some really big businesses it's a complicated one. I don't think it's necessarily always immediately easy for people to discuss, but it's like something that I'm excited is kind of coming up more, and I'm excited to like keep talking about transparency and equity and stuff that I make and the people that I work with, you know, and maybe being choosy about some companies if they're like not totally into those things. So.
Yeah, very cool. Certainly some new challenges there, especially as it relates to interface and web design when users are interacting directly with what you're designing. All right, who's next? New and emerging industry trends that you like or dislike. All right, go ahead, Donald.
So I've really enjoyed the 90s coming back as a child of the 90s. It brings back a lot of nostalgia, but it's kind of translated into a lot of big and bold type and colors in the design space. A lot of things that pop, and I know that trend has kind of been around for a little while now, but it really fits in with the kind of design that we're looking to create. I mean, obviously, it all comes down to the client and what their needs and wants are. But if I get a chance to throw some big, bold stuff in there, I'm definitely taking that.
I saw Leah shaking her head at 90s design.
Yeah, I am also a child of the 90s, but it's not my favorite era. We may have a Spotify playlist called Leah Hates the 90s, but we listen to it. So no, trends make me nervous. I tend to prefer to design in a way that's a little bit more timeless, at least I hope, fingers crossed. I love looking at the trends and like seeing things that are, you know, the big bold type, also really loving that. But I think in terms of creating a brand, figuring out a way to incorporate some of that trend in a way that there's still kind of a timeless aspect to it. You know, I think when I think of the bigger brands that haven't really changed over time, the Coca-Colas, the Nikes, the Apple, like there are subtle changes to their identity, but they find ways to infuse trend on top of their core base. So trends make me nervous. The one trend I do like is kind of piggybacking on Allie, the transparency in like the social platform. I'm very interested to see how, you know, kind of all of the social events in the world are shaping the way that we do everything, including, you know, working remote. Like, how is that translating into the design world? All of the social activism out there, inclusivity, you know, like those types of things. Like, how are we building a world around all of our social, our world is changing very rapidly right now. So keeping all of that in mind is something that I'm definitely keeping an eye on.
Could that be the final test of a brand, of branding, is how long does it last? You know, I think after however many years, Coca-Cola is definitely, they definitely get an A+ on their brand.
There's brand and product, right? Like to Allie's point, like it's hard to market a bad product. Like you want to make sure that you have something that's good at its core, and then having good branding on top of that kind of compounds the effect.
Awesome. Yeah. All right, everybody. Let's go to the chat now and answer some questions. Everybody can pull up the chat and read ahead a little bit here. Also to our audience, if anybody has some other questions that have come up in the meantime, feel free to drop them in here and we'll try to get to them all. So our first question comes from Eric. I know this guy. Do you feel that every organization needs to build a brand book or create those guidelines? Are there exceptions? So does every organization need a brand book? Who wants to answer this one? Go ahead, Leah.
Spruce doesn't have a brand guide. 2 people pretty much, so we kind of know what we're doing. But I think that there's definitely a scale aspect related to brand guides. Right now, I can be transparent, I guess. At Niche, we do not have a brand guideline. That's one of the things that I am going to be tackling, as we are, I think, about 150. That seems like the size that you need some guidelines for people to react to. But I think there is definitely a scale aspect to it for sure.
Nice. Anybody else? All right. Next question, and I believe this is relating to brand. How do you also include the target audience and validate preferred internal stakeholder options with the customer targets? So how do you also include the target audience and validate preferred internal stakeholder options with the customer targets? So bringing all these things together. Anybody have some thoughts there? Go to Donald.
Yeah, I mean, it can get tough at times, but I think that, we've been talking a lot about having the brand language and the guidelines and things like that. And I think that that doesn't just run for the people who are within that business. I think it extends out to the target audience. And I think that if you have that overall common language and common imagery and things like that, I think that it's actually pretty easy to get everybody speaking the same language. As you put that out there, people who disagree with that language are going to drop off. And so you'll have your target market, but you'll also have maybe some people come on board that you weren't thinking about. But really, it all goes back to that common language. If everybody's speaking the same language, then everybody kind of shares the same values and opinions for whatever that brand is.
Great. Anybody else? All right. Next question. And that one came from Leslie. This one comes from Laura. What is the hardest challenge you faced when designing for a client? And would you say time is a big factor? So hardest challenge when designing for a client, would you say that time is a big factor? Who wants to grab this one? Start with Leah, go to Donald.
Sure. I would say the client is the hardest part of working with a client. I definitely think that there can be challenges just with a lot of times clients want everything. And you need to be the one to kind of communicate and explain to them how each piece fits to potentially answer all of the questions that they are asking for, but it doesn't all need to be shoehorned into, the logo doesn't need to say everything. There are other pieces of the puzzle that need to answer that question for them. So for me, I think like it's the people communication, that part is always more challenging because I like to just do the work. But timeline, you're never going to have enough time. You always just need to like make do with the time you have. So if you're able to stretch out your timeline more, do it. But no matter what, like you could always use more time. So sometimes a crunch timeline is actually a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, very cool. All right, Donald.
So a lot of times a client will know what they want and what the end result is going to be. And so the biggest challenge is really coming up with something that helps reach that end goal. You may have an idea about how to do that, and they may have another idea about how to do that. And ultimately, you have to kind of form this really collaborative working team or partnership in order to guide everything to that goal that they're looking to get to. And like Leah said, they want everything. So kind of saying, well, you don't need this, or we can do it this way, or we can cut this out and save time, or maybe you should think about adding this onto it, something like that. I think those are typically some of the biggest challenges.
Gotcha. Any other thoughts on biggest challenges? Allie?
Sure. I think time is always a factor. I agree with that 200%. And I think realizing sometimes that you might be able to cook up like an ideal solution, like in visual design or in terms of what a user experience might be like. And you might not be able to convince a client you're working for that's really the thing that's going to make the difference. So you have to like let go of your beautiful dream. And or, you know, just something that maybe you're like, this is really a good standard. This is the way we should do it for it to be done really well. And there's just like not the time or money. And so, you know, you got to make something that's a little less than perfect, but actually it's probably going to be okay. And you just have to accept that. Yeah. I think that one's always a tough one. As I think a lot of us as designers are real perfectionists, and we're very astute students of how things can be done sometimes. And so we really see that vision and have to let. I have a coworker that says, "Don't let good be the enemy of great," and I just think that all the time. Like come back to good and see that it's really going to work for this person, and a lot of the times, and it's really going to propel them forward and. You know, be there and celebrate that with them and you know, let go of your idealism, I guess.
You said perfectionism, and every one of us nodded our heads. I think we're always balancing this perfectionism and acceptance.
Yeah.
All right, so last question here from the chat goes right to Leah, and this is about niche. So since this comes from Steve. So since niche is in hyper growth mode, what kind of content are you bringing to the table to support that or are planning to? And better asked, what content / design is being focused on to help fuel that growth?
Yeah, that's a good question. So as I mentioned, niche does not have a brand guide. So that is kind of one of my first big goals. As the company's growing, we're working a lot on processes in general. When you're a smaller house, a smaller company, you can kind of just pass people in the hall or Slack them and ask for something. And as the company's growing, we're learning and it's going to get harder. You can't just do that. People are going to get bombarded by work. So I'm putting in a lot of different processes, implementing design briefs, starting to implement a lot of like kickoffs for our projects that would more or less just be kicked off in a hallway conversation. So just a lot of those bigger house processes while trying not to squash the culture that's already been instilled in this really cool company. I think like niche has a really great vibe internally. Everyone loves being there. There's a lot that bigger companies and startups go through when they become a bigger company that can really hurt some of that culture. So I think everyone's really trying hard to make sure that it stays that way.
Good stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. And great. Yeah. And like I said, we're excited to be watching here and learning more about niche over the next couple of years. So, all right, everybody, 5 o'clock on the dot. That has been our power panel, Design That Sells. I'd like to thank our panelists first and foremost for showing up and offering their knowledge and their insights. I see some thank yous coming in here to the group chat. So thank you to our panelists, and thank you to all of our attendees for showing up. I hope you learned something. I know I did. Yeah, just once again, I'd like to plug Marketing Pittsburgh. Again, if you'd like to know more about us, check out marketingpittsburgh.com. We're going to be talking a lot next week about the upcoming Generator Conference. So be sure to subscribe to our mailing list, and we'll be posting a recording of this power panel on our YouTube, and we'll be sharing that around everywhere you heard from us before on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. So be sure to follow us there if you want to get that recording. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for coming to the power panel, and we'll see you next time.